Morgan, what are you working on today?
Sure. So many folks here knew me as the CEO of Tonic for the last 3 years and still serving on the board. And this is a community of global impact investors. And in my tenure there, I had the opportunity to review about 500 deals, led 30 investments, so I was very engaged on the early stage side. And that gave me a lot of opportunity to think about the word impact, which is really not value neutral or well defined. As we know, the Merriam-Webster definition is to make contact or impinge upon, especially forcefully, right? So there's sort of whether that's positive or negative is us to us as imperfect human beings over time. So as I started to really deepen my thinking there and conversations like SoCap on this, of seeing it really being built up by investors and entrepreneurs speaking about our impact on poor people out there somewhere, and they're not in the room, right? So I started to really become engaged in questions of how do I take leadership from the communities that I'm serving, and how do I create pathways for other investors that are interested in sort of leveraging this philosophy. So we came up with a couple principles around that, the idea of incorporating communities in design, governance, and ownership of enterprise, making sure we add more value than we extract as investors, and that we're balancing risk and return to investors, entrepreneurs, and communities. So I'd say that all my work now is really aligned around those principles through 3 different projects. So one is transformfinance.org, a nonprofit we just launched to help engage investors on social justice work and for community leaders to be able to access the resources in this room. So I'm founding chair, and there's a team, Andrea Armeni and Amakla Agbo, who are doing great work there. And then I'm also working on the investor side with Pi Investments, as I mentioned, so 100% mission-aligned portfolio that really wanted to put those 3 principles into action and think how we could really do our work differently to be accountable in the investments we make. And then finally, the Working World is a fund for worker-owned enterprises in Argentina, Nicaragua, and the US. I'm supporting their investment practices. Brendan Martin, the founder, is amazing. He may be here. I know he's speaking Wednesday at 5:30 on the cooperative panel, so if you want to learn more about that work, I'd recommend checking him out, and I won't take the time here. But they were really the organization that piloted the model of non-extractive finance, of how do we make sure that we're really adding more than we take out from poor communities. So I guess it's been my privilege to be able to engage these principles through the investment work that I do. And I see my work as really just trying to ask the right questions of how do we engage communities more deeply in this work, and then have the privilege of being in communities like SoCap to try to engage in that conversation.
Okay, so as moderator, I'm sort of blown away here. I'm trying to think about distilling this amazing amount of work, the body of work that's going on today versus 10 years ago. And one of the reactions I'm having is that each of you has sort of exponentially increased sort of the body of your work from what you described 10 years ago, from driving a truck to, you know, harnessing these technologies for this scalable solution, et cetera, among the 4 of you. I'm going to take a quick pause and see if we can show what the map is showing you so that we can see it up on the big screen. I don't know if that's possible. Perhaps not. The mountaintop. Okay, so we do have things going on our map. I just wanted to see how the journey was going. We'll take a look at it again later. Actually, no, I won't tell you that story. I'll keep going. There's an interesting question that I think I'm going to try to ask you, and you got to help me ask it properly, okay? Because it's a difficult, complicated question. We were talking about it a little bit backstage. It's the question about time frames. And it's the question about, you know, the need to be incredibly impatient as an entrepreneur, but also the need to make sure that you're aligning with capital that's patient for what you need to do. It's about vision versus reality. You mentioned it a little bit, Jean, when you were talking about what happened after 5 years at the Case Foundation.
Yeah.
And it's so important to our work that we start to figure out how to educate one another, not only in the context of models that work, but models with time frames that work. Not only models with time frames that work, but models with time frames that are described correctly, so that you understand the difference between what we mean by the entrepreneur's time frame, the investor's time frame, and we know where this is going. So I'm going to ask each of you to try to highlight where a part of your own working world, your work today, where you see time frames as critically important to you right now. And then tell me why. okay? And I'm going to have to ask each of us to try to be succinct, but that's the question I want to challenge you with. So whoever thinks they can take that one on, feel free to give me a nod, and I'll let you go first.
I can take it.
Morgan. And bear with me, if any of you, if I sort of have to go, tell me more, or cut it off, or whatever.
So I think of it as two ways as sort of a serial entrepreneur. So the first organization, the Responsible Endowments Coalition, it's its 10-year anniversary next year. No one from the original board of staff is involved. And that to me is kind of the greatest victory, that we built a movement so big that it didn't rely on any one person. And I could definitely see Tonic moving down that path as well as a community of investors. So I think sometimes this sort of entrepreneurial attitude of, I am so at the center of this thing, I can't imagine never stepping away, that we need to have leader-full organizations. We're not so focused on the sole entrepreneurs so that these things have bigger lives than us as individuals. So I'm proud to be on my third organization in 10 years and knowing that the others seem to be on a good trajectory. My other thought on timeline, and I think this is where as I get older, I get a lot more patient. And there's sort of the tradition of the youthful, impatient activist. I'm really actually thrilled for our movement that what back in the day in the 70s was considered this absolutely radical practice of screening your investments, SRI, is considered very boring right now, right, by the folks in this room. And in the same way, when I've heard some sort of the thinking around, well, we're finally getting enterprises off the ground at all and finally convincing people that you can do impact investment, now you want to insert this whole angle around incorporating communities and design and ownership, and can we just get one thing off the ground before we try to push it further? And my hope is that this is our decade, right? If it's going to be $1 trillion moving into the sector over the next 10 years, that's 5 times official development aid. That completely shifts the way that most of the world experiences development. So this is our opportunity to define that well, to make sure it grows in a way that we feel really good about. And I would love for the things that we're saying today to look really boring in 30 years. So that's my goal.
Okay, so let me see if I can paraphrase to make sure I got all that. The first one was about being a founder who's willing to think immediately about succession. It's about having the institution, the organization, the enterprise be more important than the person. And all of us being attentive to that as part of all the models we're creating for a good economy, for a social capital future that's robust and resilient. And the second point that you made was really about your impatience in a way. It was about the fact that you see opportunity in the trillions of dollars that are going to come our way in this next decade. And you were saying this is the decade. So you're seeing a 10-year horizon to get some big, shit done. Is that?
That's funny, because I see that as patient, maybe, relatively. I guess I'm much more interested in how do we make sure we're doing the right thing so that when we expand it to that $1 trillion, rather than racing to hit that goal and then look back and say, did we really have the impact we could have achieved?
Okay. So since that was